Well, good morning at Swan Reach and at Bruthen. I gather you're both going to be able to take this sermon, which I've pre-recorded for you this Sunday. Thanks very much to Brian for negotiating with me over a number of weeks now. And it's unfortunate that our planned trip to Canberra and that was going to be followed by our visiting Panbilla to speak at a Rotary Club and then on to Bruthen and Swan Reach, and that's been put on the back burner in a sense because we're in lockdown still in Melbourne. So I want to just start by saying that I've actually been through Swan Reach on a number of occasions. I can't recall stopping there, which is unfortunate, but I have been to Bruthen and I've been there several times and stopped, and I've actually letterboxed the church there in the past. And I've also been on from there to further up into the hills where Roberta Harris was involved with a Uniting Church parish, and I've been to visit her. Interestingly, in December a year ago, nearly going on for 2 years now, or 18 months, I actually was booked to speak at Malakuta, and that was the weekend on which they were isolated with the fires. They've just rebooked me to come back in October, and the Panbilla Rotary Club has asked if I can extend my trip to go from Malakuta to Panbilla to speak to the Rotary Club there. So people are thinking on their feet, and we're working together across church and community as well to take opportunities to speak to people, to answer questions mainly that people ask about the work I do with the Asylum Seeker Centre. So I want to start by saying that I normally prepare from the lectionary, so I read the set readings for the day and I try to apply one or more of those to the work that we do and possibly the challenge that you might have in your area there. So the Gospel reading today is, there are two parables that are very commonly read. We know about them. The one is the issue of planting the seed and then knowing when to reap the crop. And the second one is the comparison between the mustard seed and the tree that grows from it, and then the things that happen as a result of that growth. So I want to say that we, in our own ways, in our own communities, in our own situations, are called by God to reach out to the people around us and to, in some sense, bring them further and further towards an acceptance and a knowledge of God the Creator. In the story of Samuel this morning, and I studied Samuel when I was in Ridley College, in that story, that's the story of the calling of David and the way in which God called Samuel to do that task of anointing David, and the way in which Samuel, in a sense against his better judgment, went in faith and found the person that God had selected and anointed him to take over in that situation. In the psalm, if you follow on, you'll find in the psalm, that's a psalm written by David, and David in that psalm is recording some of the things that he feels and thinks, and they transcribe into our lives and our situations today as well. So with the Asylum Seeker Centre, you may or may not know what an asylum seeker is, so I'll define an asylum seeker to start with. An asylum seeker is an applicant for refugee status. So you can apply for refugee status for any reason, providing that you're here in Australia and you're then known as an asylum seeker. People who apply for refugee status in overseas situations, in refugee camps and the like, if they succeed in their refugee application, are then put on hold, and then one or another country might take them in, and Australia is one of those countries that takes a small number of refugees in, and they come here with all the rights of an Australian resident when they arrive. Asylum seekers, on the other hand, in Australia, fall into two categories. The first one is the better known one in a sense, and they're the boat people who have been deemed to be illegal immigrants. And we had, in our situation here in Australia, we have the government defining them in such a way that if they came by boat, they would never become permanent, and they would be taken offshore for processing on Manus or Nauru. Over time, the people in both those places have run down in terms of the camps, and many of those people who've turned up in Australia with government certification, saying that they are on protection visas and they still haven't, over the last few years now, still haven't obtained permanency. So they're people in the main who, particularly on Nauru, 90-odd% of the people on Nauru, the boat people, as I've termed them, they've come here and they've succeeded in convincing the government that they have a real fear of persecution. Under the United Nations Charter, there are categories in which you can claim that, and they're to do with being persecuted because of your political views, your ethnicity, maybe your sexuality. But one of the things you can't claim in order to be a refugee under these conditions is economic hardship. It's got nothing to do with economic hardship. So as I've said, 90-odd% of the people who came by boat illegally, who have been told they'll never become permanent, 90-odd% of those people have actually met the United Nations criteria for proving a real fear of persecution. There's another group who can become permanent if they succeed, and they're the ones who fly in. People can fly in under various visas, so they could come as a tourist, or they could be visiting family, or they could come on a worker permit or a student permit. And in those situations, they can, when they arrive in some cases, or later on when their visas are changed, they may claim to be asylum seekers, and they then have to prove that real fear of persecution, and they're put onto a protection visa. So they're taken off, say, a tourist visa and put onto a protection visa. Only around 20% of people who come in that way and make those applications actually succeed in meeting the United Nations criteria. So there's a clear bias in that sense in terms of statistics to say that the people that come by boat are 4.5 times more capable of proving a real fear of persecution than people who come by air. So in Dandenong, we have many people that come in more and more people now, in a sense, coming in by air, but the majority of people I see are still people who have come by boat, and they're waiting for the government to make a final decision on what they need to do. They've all obviously been released from Nauru, and they're living in and around Dandenong, the area in which I work. So we see over 100 people in that area. We see 100 families, I should say. There's about 450 people. And of those people, something of the order of 90 of them are Australian-born children of asylum seekers. So I'm saying this just to contrast the situation, which is public knowledge now, of the Biloela family who are or were asylum seekers on Nauru and have made various claims in the meantime, and they're now in custody on Christmas Island, having not yet been able to convince the government that they are in real fear of persecution. So I have something of the order of 90 children in similar situations coming to see me basically on a weekly basis, or their families, I should say their families coming to see me, because I see the children on occasion but not regularly. So when people come to see me, the arrangement is that they come for food once a week, and we get food from various sources I can explain in a minute. But if they miss 4 weeks in a row, I take them off, because I'm there to provide emergency food and support. And I doubt that people who are able to maintain themselves for 4 weeks and then come back are really in that situation. So after 4 weeks, I take people off, and that's meant that since Christmas, or since November last year actually, I suspended registrations, and then as people have not come for 4 weeks in a row, I've taken them off, and we've gone from something like 550 down to around 450 people. We've gone from 130 odd families down to about 110. So that's the situation I'm in Dandenong, and I rely as a ministry of faith. I've never asked for anything. I'm a steward of God's provision in that sense. So God provides everything we need, and my job is to use my own ability to distribute what we get in a fair way to the people that come in. And that's why I have that rule that I mentioned. So previously, prior to COVID, I should say, that we had support from community and church, as well as funding that was given to me by individuals and churches. And I was able to buy food from Food Bank, a carload of food, and that was about half what we needed. The rest came from the community. Last year, when COVID restrictions were placed on churches, that food dried up overnight. And I remember the first week that I went down to the SBC food outlet, which is near us, and I filled my car up with, I think it was something like $700 worth of food. And I bought it, and I knew that that would help us out the following week. But I also had in the back of my mind that I wasn't going to be able to sustain that volume of purchases with the donations that I got, because we don't get that sort of funding directly into the centre. As it turned out, the following week, Greater Dandenong Council rang me and asked if they could help, and then for the best part of a year they provided me with a carload of food which I was able to pick up on a Tuesday. About half that food was fresh, picked up from or purchased by the Dandenong Council on Tuesday morning. So when I got it on Tuesday afternoon, we were able to distribute that on the Wednesday and the Thursday, basically fresh to the people that come into us. We aim to finish the distribution, so all the fresh food particularly that we got was given out in the next 2 days. Well, that funding ran out a few weeks back now, 4 weeks ago, and the council has arranged with the Victorian government to obtain some finance, and I meet their criteria for support. So next week I'll be getting finance directly into my account. $4,400 is what they've indicated, which will go into my account and allow me to buy food, or as I've done in the past, when we accumulate enough spare donations, I buy them as I get the money. I buy vouchers, $50 gift vouchers, and we distribute them when everyone is able to get one. It depends on the number on the books. When I've got enough, I then distribute that extra funding in the way of gift vouchers. So what will happen with the state government applied funds through Greater Dandenong is that I'll use that funding to build up a reserve of gift vouchers. When we've got enough, I'll distribute them to the asylum seekers. So in that way, the church has been replaced by the community in this sense, but the churches are also starting to come back into the system. And although we've been locked down for the last 2 Sundays, I understand this Sunday churches will be back, at least in not to full capacity, but they'll be back so that the right distancing is applied in the church congregations. So I should give you a couple of examples of what we do to help individuals, and then I need to finish. But in Dandenong, we've got people, the majority of people we see are Muslim, while we operate in church environment in the Redeemed Christian Church of God, a Nigerian Pentecostal church. I've previously been in the Uniting Church. I've been funded by the Catholic Mercy Foundation in Sydney. I've been in a St Kilda Baptist Church, and in the first situation I was in, Balaclava Anglican Church. So as I've aimed to be an interdenominational Christian response to the material needs of asylum seekers and refugees, I think the breadth of support that I've had in the provision of facilities, none of which have cost me anything, indicates that I've succeeded to that extent at least. We've had opportunity to visit churches of different denominations, and I've had support from many people in the community and a widespread group of churches in and around Melbourne and further afield in some cases. So that's where we're at with that. In Just as an example of people we see, and this is just this last week, a single mother who's come in from Iran. She's got 2 Australian-born children, both of whom are autistic. One is severely deaf and has a high-level autism. The other one is autistic but doesn't speak, and he's 5 now, so you'd expect him to be able to, but he doesn't communicate verbally at all. So they're 2 people that come in with their mum. The husband and now 18 and 20-year-old daughters have separated because there was an intervention order involved there which required the 2 halves of the family to separate. And I think that's probably a fair sort of indication that being on Nauru with teenage daughters and then being in Australia with a younger family creates real tensions on individuals, and that family has gone their separate ways. So the mother and the 2 children are walking distance from where we are in Dandenong, and the father and his 2 daughters have moved further afield. So that's one example. Other examples involve people from Sri Lanka, and incidentally these are people who have proved persecution. They've been registered as refugees, but having come by boat they've been told they will not succeed with their application for permanent residence. There are a number of people in that category. There's another Afghan lady that came in, and her son also is autistic or on the autism scale, and she works as a nurse, and her son, at least, she's a single mother, her son is sent to school, and during this COVID lockdown has been able to be looked after by the school because his mother is working and needs that support. So people come in those categories, and there are others as well. Iranian, as I mentioned, Sri Lankan. The biggest single group would be people from Rohingya people from the former Burma, now Myanmar, and they're people who have come in and, as with many of the others, have been coming to see me for upwards of 5, 6, 7, 8 years. In fact, in November this year, there'll be one lady who's been coming in for 10 years, having been released from Nauru. So it's a long time for them to be denied permanent residence in Australia, but it's a situation in which they've been dependent on charity for a number of years. Later on they were able to work, but more recently getting work has been a problem under COVID anyway. The Rohingya people don't have a written language, so they not only have to learn to speak English, but they also have to learn how to write. And one lady that came in to see me this week actually is in a household of 17 people, several generations, and when I first met her she could barely speak English, but she's made a real attempt. She's very intelligent. She's made a real attempt to learn English, and not only English but to learn the correct grammar. So it's a great tribute to her that she's doing that, and she comes in regularly to get food from us at the centre. We also have a free op shop, so everything that's given to us is given away. We have a free op shop, and at the moment that's not in full operation because of the COVID limitations. But in addition to that, we also refurbish computers and give computers out, and people around Melbourne and different parts know that we do that. And last week I had a call from a caseworker who asked if I could give a laptop to a young student and a normal PC to another person whose children needed it at home. So they came and got those 2 computers, and they're refurbished by a former asylum seeker from Turkey who works in the centre on Wednesday and Thursday, not only doing up computers but checking out the electrical stuff as well, and generally being very helpful and supportive in the food room. So that's probably enough. I just glanced down to look at the time and we're coming to 20 minutes. I'll finish in the way that I generally finish in these situations, and it came to me some time ago that we quite often ask for God's blessing on what we do, And I just come firmly to the conclusion that we're not blessed by God to have a good time and to do things that make us happy, and in that sense, but we're also blessed by God to be a blessing to others. And I think as you operate in your two centres at Bruthen and at Swan Ridge, I'm sure there are many people that come into your ambit there who have needs, and you can meet those needs. And as with the two parables that we heard, we don't know how long it's going to be before the fruit comes, but we are promised the fruit will be plentiful. So it may be an opportunity for you to think about what it is that you can do to close that gap in the community on people who have made contact with the church but have not fully understood the gospel. So God bless you to be a blessing to others.